I have been asked to tell another story from my experience as a trauma scene cleaner. It has been a while since I posted a story about an unalive house, but I have had several requests for more stories about my experiences in the field of trauma scene work. If you don't know what that is, I used to lead a crew that would go in after a murder, suicide, unattended death, accidental death, fire death, or any manner of incident that caused damage to a structure and left behind a scene that the victim's family shouldn't have to see. Now, I know my stories are not scary in the haunted or serial killer type, but the fact is, most people couldn't handle walking into a scene like many of the ones I've been on. We actually had to be very careful how we trained crew members who worked on such scenes. It was often a volunteer basis for working on those types of scenes, meaning we didn't force anyone to go to a house where the dad killed all the children before blowing his brains out on the lazy boy. We just didn't start someone in training and then go, oh, by the way, we're going to a multiple homicide. Anyway, if there was a way to describe some of the sights and smells of doing this type of work, I'm sure you would see how truly scary or messed up this all is. First of all, I have to say that suicide is not glamorous, nor is it ever over for those around you. If you need help, please get it. Don't let your loved ones find you that way. It not only changes them, but also the feeling inside the house. Anyway, back to my story. This took place in the late 1990s, just before I got out of the field. We got a call to dispatch a crew out to a house, and we were told that there was an incident with at least one death. Sometimes it is given to us that way, but never like a real whole story. But sometimes we see the true story on the evening news, or from a neighbor who talks too much. We arrive at this modest house. Not really a high-end home, but not a low-end either. It was a two-story home about halfway into a cul-de-sac street. As with some scenes, there is a cluster of neighbors outside looking at who we are and why we are there. The sheriff's department had just released the scene, so all of the crime scene investigators had already done their job. As I approached the house, I noticed a ton of what looked like bullet holes in the stucco, broken glass, and a long blood stain on the driveway. We went inside and had to suit up almost immediately, as the police had probably used tear gas. There were blood stains all over. It looked as if someone had been dragged through the house with blood gushing. There were areas that had pooled blood, areas where things kind of looked like explosions happened, for which I assume flashbangs were used, or maybe the guy inside had shot up. Probably what strikes you the most in situations like this is how benign the underside looks. I don't know how to describe it, but just imagine, if you will, a place looking like the inside of a home molded out of the TV set of Full House. Now imagine that same TV set with blood smeared and pooled, bullet holes, and tons of broken glass. I mean, they seemed like a very normal family. I remember in their living room a big blue woodcut sign that said family, you know, before live, laugh, love. Signs were in style, and under that sign was a bunch of family photos of kids, parents, Christmas, graduation, and vacations. Other things in the house were a wall dedicated to the dad's love of his sports teams, and pictures of him with his buddies at games and stuff. So, what happened? From what we pieced together from the news reports, neighbors who wanted to talk to us while we were cleaning his blood off the driveway, and from the scene itself, the dad went crazy. He had been talking about demons. Not like I had my own demons, but actual demons. He was sure that he was being attacked by the devil, and that demons were trying to take the souls of his family. So rather than let the demons take his family, he killed them so they would go to heaven. He ended up barricading himself inside the house. It looked like some family members tried to get away after being shot and stabbed, but one collapsed in the kitchen, one escaped somehow, and one was pulled out by the police. He ended up shooting back at the police, and the neighborhood was evacuated for blocks. I wasn't sure about all that as we arrived on scene much later, but that was what the people outside were saying. In the end, he escaped the house and ended up on the roof, still shooting back, and the police shot him. He fell from the roof, and that was his blood we were cleaning from the driveway. He murdered his wife, One of his older children later died in the hospital. One of the kids was killed inside the house. One escaped, and I think another family member that lived with them was unharmed as they were not at the house when this all went down. It took us a lot longer to clean this scene as there were so many holes, and we had to remove almost all of the carpet and soft surfaces due to the tear gas. It was a terrible scene inside. I know this might sound religious or whatever, but come across enough of these scenes, and you start to really believe evil does exist. Back in the 80s, my Aunt Kay was in her early 20s. This was before she married my uncle, and she would drive long distances back and forth between her parents and my uncles to visit. It was a transitional period for them. He had just graduated, and she hadn't moved out yet to be with him. It was a long drive across several states and through the desert, which took her hours. This desolate highway would have stretches of road that lasted hundreds of miles, where you quite often wouldn't see another driver, let alone a gas station. So Aunt Kay set out and began one of these journeys. A couple hours into the drive, Aunt Kay noticed a dark vehicle slowly catching up to her. She barely noticed as she continued to sing along to Les Miserables until the vehicle got aggressively close. She turned off the music and looked into her rearview mirror, seeing the vehicle flash its lights and a hand pointing at her car and motioning to pull over. Alarmed, she quickly slowed and began to look for a good place to pull off the road to see what must be wrong with her car. Just as her resolve wavered, she started questioning if she truly did feel what she felt. She started slowing back down when the dark vehicle picked up speed. It entered the oncoming traffic lane and came level with my aunt's car. The driver smiled, pointed, motioned, and mouthed the words "pull over" to my aunt. She said the second she looked into his eyes, she felt pure evil. She felt a horribly sick feeling in the pit of her stomach, and again heard the words in her head. "Don't pull over." She described him as looking scary and greasy, and she noticed he was missing a couple teeth in his smile that she'll never forget. That sent chills through her. This quickly dispelled any thoughts she had of pulling over, and she put the pedal to the metal to try to lose him. He chased after her. She slowed down and he slowed down. She sped up and he sped up. It got to the point that he began to try to push her car off the road. Aunt Kay was to the point of tears as this creep continued to terrorize her alone, out in the middle of nowhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Aunt Kay sees a couple of semis off in the distance. She felt if only she could get close to or even get in between those trucks, she would be safe, so she took off. He continued to flash his lights, honk his horn, and try to hit her car until she got close enough to the trucks. As she got in between them, she saw the dark vehicle slow down and eventually disappear from view. She stayed with the trucks for a couple hours until she felt safe enough to pull over at a gas station and cry. Fast forward several years. My aunt and uncle are married. He's working at a law firm as a high-profile criminal prosecutor in Las Vegas. She's now a full-time mom to several young children. Since I've known my aunt, she's been obsessed with true crime. Dateline and unsolved mysteries were always playing at their house. This day was no different. She was folding laundry in the kitchen while listening to TV in the other room. The interviewer was talking about a man who was being interviewed on death row. As she matched another pair of socks, she heard the man describe one of his tactics for procuring victims. According to him, he would wait along the side of the highway. A car would go by with a family, and he'd wait. Another car with a male driver would go by, and he'd wait. But every so often, a car with a pretty woman driving alone would go by. So I'd pull out behind them and follow them. "Thanks, Charlie." The second she began to pull off the road, she said she felt and heard as clearly as day, "Don't pull over." Then again, stronger, "Don't pull over." Call it God, intuition, or just a gut feeling. But a jolt of adrenaline and fear shot through Aunt Kay's body as she hit the gas and peeled back out onto the highway. Heart pumping, Aunt Kay silently asked herself, what the hell was that? as she saw the vehicle peel out behind her. The dark vehicle continued to closely follow, flash its lights, and motion for her to pull over. Fear and confusion set in as Aunt Kay began to question what was going on. Why was the driver motioning for her to pull over? Was there something wrong with her car? And what the hell was that warning she felt? It would have been a severe situation if her car broke down out there, especially before cell phones. But she pressed on. I'd flash my brights, honk, and motion for him to pull over. Aunt Kay, paralyzed, continued to listen. When they would eventually pull over, I'd tell them to pop the hood, and I'd be able to tell them what was wrong with their car. They would, and I'd yank a couple wires. When the car wouldn't start, I'd tell them, no problem. My buddy has a shop in the next town. I can give you a ride and he'll give you a fair deal. My aunt slowly moved to the living room. They'd get in, and I'd rape and kill them, bury them anywhere in the desert. When asked how many times he did this, he responded, they'll never find all the bodies. I can't even count. And how many got away? 2 or 3. My aunt stood alone, staring into the same toothless grin she saw on that highway that day. It was Henry Lee Lucas. A pretty creepy experience I had back in the early 2000s in Japan. A little background on me for context. I grew up as a biracial military brat and spent the better part of 2 decades growing up in Japan. Having spent years growing up in Japan and the US, I can confidently say that there is something different when it comes to talking about paranormal or strange experiences. I imagine that many on the subreddit may be familiar with how popular spooky Asian stories have become in the last 20 or so years. So read on to hear about some of the strangest occurrences I have encountered. During my late teens and early 20s, my social circle and I had a naive obsession with exploring places in Japan known for paranormal activities, urban legends, and investigating creepy areas. This was prior to the advent of reality television, which really blew up like ghost hunting shows. In Japan, shows like this would broadcast regularly in the summer. Like October is the witching season for Western cultures. August is for Japan. This was our motivation for participating in these excursions. So here's my story. As a military brat who grew up in Japan while attending school on a US military installation, I graduated in the early 2000s. Following graduating class moved back to the US. Most of my graduating class moved back to the US to pursue college or start their adult lives. Most would leave and never return to Japan. My parents are Japanese, so I had every reason to return. It was December, and I had just returned home to Japan after my fall semester at college. To my relief, a couple of my friends chose to remain in Japan after high school. So I had friends to hang out with while home on vacation. One evening, I was out joyriding with my buddies. We had nowhere important to be, and were just driving around aimlessly. Occasionally, we stopped by popular hangout spots for young adults, hoping to meet some cute Japanese girls to flirt with, as how else would a couple of young 19-year-old dudes want to spend an evening? My friend, who I will call Jay, had a 90s Nissan Silvia, and he was obsessed with drifting. Truth be told, he was not good at it. You really couldn't fault the guy for trying though. That evening, he suggested that we take off for Asamizo Park near our hometown of Sagamihara, as this large public park had many parking lots peppered throughout its grounds. The lots were prime locations for him to practice, whipping his car around without causing damage or fender benders. Without hesitation, we all agree and head in that direction. About 20 minutes later, we are passing the main entrance to Asamizo. During the day, this is a pleasant public park that many people enjoy. Japan, in comparison to other countries, is a relatively safe country. This park was no exception to that notion. However, it did have some unfortunate events happen there. I will elaborate on this more later. After driving into the park for about 7 minutes, we reached the first parking lot. It was around 10 o'clock at night. We pull in and park. I hopped out of the car, pulled out a fresh pack of cigarettes, and lit one up. The evening was brisk, and I gazed around, letting my night vision calibrate as the lights far off in the distance twinkled. My other friend with us, R, also lit a cigarette, and we proceeded to have a conversation about whether Jay would be able to even get his car sideways. Jay pulls out and begins to whip his car around the parking lot. As Jay's car spun counterclockwise, the wailing of his tires attempting to grip the asphalt broke the silence of the evening. Even now, I can close my eyes and still remember the smell of burning rubber. Adjacent to the parking lot was a tree line that led into some thick brush and wooded areas. The park was known for its green belts scattered throughout it. I remember looking over my shoulder a few times that evening, because I had this feeling that we were being watched from the woods. But each time I scanned the tree line, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. What happened next would cause me to jump so hard that I laugh even now when thinking about it. The cell phone in my right pocket started ringing and vibrating, and I jumped with fright. The fact that light paranoia had set in from watching the tree lines did not help with the anxiety experienced from the unexpected phone call. As I was attending college in the States and was only back on vacation, I no longer had a cell phone in Japan. In fact, my younger sister had lent her phone to me so that I could be reached if necessary. I pulled the phone out, thinking that she or my mother was calling for something, as none of my friends even had this number. I looked down at the green backlit lease screen and saw, displayed in Japanese, a restricted number. I thought it was strange, but figured maybe my sister was calling from a public phone. Yes, those were still a thing back then. I answered the phone and said, "Moshi Moshi." That's how you answer a phone in Japanese, and there was nothing but silence for a response. I remembered hearing a bit of static, and then finally I heard the voice of a Japanese girl. My immediate thoughts were that this must be a friend of my sister, and so I explained that I am her brother and am borrowing her phone for the evening. If she needed to get a hold of my sister, she should call the house. She apologized, and I reassured her that no harm had been done, and then promptly ended the phone call. I placed the cell phone back in my pocket and focused back on the ruckus of noise coming from Jay's car. It must have been 10 minutes later. The cell phone in my pocket began ringing again. This time, I was sure that it had to be my sister or my mother. Earlier that day, I left home and did not say where I was going, or when I planned on returning home. It wasn't uncommon for my mother or sister to call and ask if I had eaten dinner, or if she should leave food out for when I would return. I pulled the phone out, and once again, I have a phone call, and it was from a restricted number. I answered the phone, and this time, the voice of the same Japanese girl was on the other end of the call. Before I could ask why she was calling for my sister, she cut me off. Now, based on the previous phone call, I thought there were a couple things funny. I know most of my sister's friends and recognized their voices over the phone. This girl, on the other hand, did not. Additionally, my sister never mentioned anything about new friends, and her circle was tight. She wasn't very big on being a social butterfly, but perhaps I was wrong. My sister is 3 years younger than me, and so my assumption was that this girl had to be around my sister's age and too young for me. I had very little interest in engaging in conversation with her. As she probed me with questions, I kept my answers vague. I don't even know why I continued to entertain a conversation with her, but hanging up would just be very rude. Suddenly, she asked what I was doing in a park so late in the evening. I almost began to answer when it dawned on me. I did not mention anything about where I was or what I was doing. I told her I never said I was at a park. She lightly giggled and tried to play it off, insisting that she thought I said I was at a park. I told her this was weird and that I had to go and hang up. Jay grew tired of drifting in this parking lot. He pulled up to us and, from the driver's side, suggested we change up the scenery. R and I hopped back in the vehicle, and off we went. Now, at another parking lot, we hop out, and Jay continues to do his thing. This parking lot had soccer fields not too far from it, and the lamps in the parking lot had an orange hue, which was a bit comforting. Oddly enough, the feeling of being watched returned to me. I swung around to my right and stared at the empty field on the other side of the parking lot fence. There was nothing. At this point, Jay parks his car and shuts it off. Now, silence and a thin film of burned rubber veiled the parking lot. R starts asking, "What's up with the phone calls?" I began to explain to Jay and R what transpired. They both agreed that it was a little strange, but speculated that maybe my sister mentioned to her friends that her older brother was back in town. Jay proceeds to tease me that I should start talking to the chick, but I protest because I have no interest. Suddenly, my phone rings again. Same deal, restricted phone number, and same girl this time. She sounds a bit more aggressive. "How come you left? What was wrong with the last spot?" I ask what she meant. She then says, "You left the last parking lot you were just at." I remember the hairs standing on the back of my neck. I made it a point to be vague and never mention what I was doing, or where I was. Yet somehow, this girl knew what I was doing and knew that we had left the first parking lot. Something didn't feel right, so I hung up on her. A moment later, and my phone is blowing up. I answer again, this time irate. "What do you want?" There is silence, and then I hear light static. In a sort of hushed manner, I hear her voice. "I'm at the field. I see you." I spin around and face the field, looking for any sign of a person. I remember my heart racing a bit as I fumbled to figure out what exactly was going on. "What do you mean, you saw me at the field?" I asked. She tells me that she sees me standing with my friends wearing my gray jacket in my buddy's car. She tells me that she is coming over to us and wants to hang out. The line goes dead. I look at both Jay and R and give the rundown on what she said. They both had weird looks on their faces, and I know them well enough to know when they're lying or pulling my leg. They both just look clueless. My phone rings again. "Hey, I'm almost there. Will you wait for me?" the girl asks. "Huh. No. What is going on here? Why do you keep asking me questions? How do you know where I am? Just who are you anyway? I know all my sister's friends, and I don't recognize your voice," I exclaimed. "I never said I knew your sister," she replied in another hushed manner. At this point, I was like, what the hell? I look back at the field, and I don't see anything. As I was still on the phone with her, I asked where she was. She said that she would be there shortly. I'm sure my friends sensed the panic in my voice. Jay goes on about how nobody knows we're fucking out here. How does this chick seem to know our location? Mind you, this is 2000 and social media, internet 2.0, and smartphones are not things yet. People just can't get your location at that point. On top of that, we are a few kilometers out of the way. You just don't randomly run into people like that. The evening is getting later, as it is past 11 p.m., and I have no explanation as to what is going on. My phone rings again, and before I can even say hello, she asks if I can see her. I am spinning and jerking like a laundry machine agitator at this point. Both of my friends decided that this was too weird. She yanks the phone from my hand and proceeds to speak with her as well. I should explain that we all speak Japanese. Although I am telling this story in English, all the conversations that are happening are in Japanese. R, feeling like this was a joke, decided to toy with her a bit. He starts to ask her what she is wearing. She begins explaining something to him based on what I can hear from how he responds. He then asks her what color her undergarments are, but then she abruptly hangs up. R tells me that he thinks he annoyed her enough that she may not bother calling again. We all nervously chuckle as we cannot even begin to understand what just transpired. My phone blew up again. Same deal. Restricted call. I answer again. This time upset, but I'm cut off. Her voice is much louder now. I could hear what sounded like wind in the background. She begins by saying that she is quickly approaching us, yelling to not leave her. She wants to be with us. All of a sudden, I heard Jay drop a soda can as he faced the field. What the fuck is that? I remember Jay saying it in disbelief. I hang up the phone. I look at both my friends, and Jay motions to jump in the car. We all jump in, and he stomps on the gas as we make our escape. My phone rings again. I look, and although I don't want to answer, I feel as though I need to. I take the call and I can hear her voice. It sounds slightly huskier. She casually said, "It's a shame that you all left before I could reach you." Jay is driving frantically away from the park. At the time, I had no idea where he was taking us. It was just quiet in the car as I had the phone held up to my ear. Oh well. I guess I will just need to follow and find you all at the Family Mart that you're going to stop at. She said this as she gave a creepy laugh. I then replied, "What the hell do you mean by the Family Mart that we are going to?" Before I realized it, Jay had cut the wheel hard, pulled to the side of the road, threw his four-way hazard lights, and brought the car to a sudden stop. I damn near hit the dashboard while sitting in the shotgun seat. He turned and looked at me. I can still remember the white look on his face. He then quietly asked, "How'd she know I was taking us to Family Mart?" Family Mart is a Japanese convenience store chain found throughout Japan. I hung up the phone and then powered it off. We sat in silence for a moment there. This felt like a weird dream or something. I told Jay, "Let's go somewhere else." Shortly after, we drove to a 24-hour restaurant that was our hangout spot and where many of our Japanese friends frequented. We just wanted somewhere brightly lit and somewhat crowded to chill out. As we walked up to the entrance, I could see some friends occupying a booth. We walked in and proceeded to join the party. After we ordered some coffee, we started explaining the strange occurrence. Initially, everyone listened with excitement, but as I explained the story, the look of excitement written on everyone's faces eventually faded, and it got awkwardly quiet. Another female friend of mine, who sat across from me, I'll call her Aiken, looked at me and asked again where we were in the park. As she asked me this, I could see her make eye contact with her boyfriend, H. He pulled out a cigarette and lit it just as he went into his explanation. He then began to explain, "You guys, you all do know what happened in Asamizo Park, right?" We all exchange a blank glance. Continuing, there was an incident that happened in that park one evening where a girl was walking through the park in the evening. Someone approached her and dragged her into the greenbelt, where she was raped and strangled. I heard some rumors about some bad juju associated with the area. In disbelief, I scoff. "You're joking, right?" Without any hesitation, he looked at me and said, "Nope,